All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Open Chat. This is the PenPod podcast where we have this conversation around design code, particularly the collaboration, but also everything open source about design. And today I have Jan Six with me. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you here, Jan. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to invite you to this podcast because you clearly have a good understanding in what it takes for designers and developers to enjoy a collaborative process. So why don't you give a bit of background on who you are, where you're working at, and particularly the a project that we're going to cover today.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jan Six, and I am based in Salzburg, Austria. I am currently working at GitHub as a staff product designer, and have been there for now 1.5 years, I think. What brought me there was really a long history of being a designer, a traditional graphic designer, then entering interactive areas. So I was a mix between screen and print design. I just found that I really love web design in general as something that I enjoy doing. And I eventually learned to love code as well. So in the beginning, I was kind of staying clear of that. I think every designer has that, where you're designing stuff and not getting too deep into the code itself. But once I got into that, I really learned to love it. So I went through all the agency stuff. At some point, eventually also joined a startup where I was more on the mixed side of things. So I was able to get into a lot of different areas, which really helped to understand the code side of it as well, to be able to build it yourself. Naturally that led me to GitHub itself. And I'm mainly working on the issues side there. And on the side, I'm building the Token Studio product, which is basically the Token Studio for Figma plugin right now. So allowing designers in Figma to use design tokens is really what it's all about, to give them a way to actually use that technology.
Yeah, and actually that got our attention because that's a pretty interesting project, and it's open source. It's you can find that on GitHub, of course. And we had some conversations in the past around that and the future for that project. We'll probably cover some of that. But definitely here we want to invite people that are in the kind of at the vanguard of all this thinking. What's the future of collaboration? What are the roles of tools? What are the roles of languages? And what is just the role of the market or the skill sets, the conversation. So there's a ton of stuff around that. In this podcast, we like to just have a very open conversation. So you know this because I asked you to produce a few questions. So kind of ask me anything. So you have the right to ask questions. Of course, I have the right to ask some questions to you, and I would like to start with one, which is if you think there is strong value in having a one-to-one design to code relationship, the transformation. What's the value of that, and whether that should be part of a design course, like if that would be a skill that designers learning to design and prototype, particularly in the software product world, should have or not. Whether the one-to-one correlation is relevant, and if so, whether that should be part of the the knowledge toolkit, so to speak, for designers.
Yeah, I think as someone who's both a designer and a developer at times, I really love to jump between these two worlds. And I think that was something that really helped me personally to understand what it is that I'm building in the first place. So as soon as you get that understanding of how does my design get turned into code, you unlock this level for yourself to understand what it is you're building, much like an architect would also have an understanding of how a house is being built compared to just drawing pretty plans. There is something of understanding it. I'm not sure if you need to know a one-to-one relationship between design to code, but at least understanding the the structure of what gets built helps immensely. I used to
Okay.
teach design students in the past on getting into UX design, and one of those things was also always to teach them a bit about the web box model to understand that it's not always free form that you're going to be designing. You always have to come up with a way to put it more into a structured way. And as soon as you unlock that, you really um, build differently with different constraints, but also it does something to your thinking, much like with tokens, when you think of this whole tokens way,
Yeah.
it also unlocks something for you. So I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a one-to-one transformation
Yeah.
that is being taught, but at least getting across the understanding of how my design will turn out in code helps immensely.
And what do you think? So relates to that question. Um, Design and code might actually go at different speeds, like evolve differently. So that one-to-one could be very aspirational and yet invisible. Because what do you think about which part of those, those two languages, in a way, actually goes at so different pace that is the other one that is trying to catch up? Is it design that has more freedom and code is constrained somehow? Or is actually code evolving rapidly and design has to kind of catch up, where do you see the tension coming from? Who is lagging behind, not lagging behind, but like having to make that effort to make sure that that transformation, whether it's one-to-one or not, remains feasible.
That's an interesting one. I think that it really depends. In most cases, I would say it's design that needs to do the catch up,
Okay.
especially once a component has been launched or a design has been launched. In most cases, you are updating slight variations of the component or slight changes. You're doing slight changes to the component itself. But that really depends. So if you have like a system that is built in multiple languages, and one language is kind of being left behind because it's not used as much, there is not a lot of
Mm,
investment happening in that area. So that component
yeah.
might get, um, yeah, it might get updated, but not in the same pace. So
Yeah.
suddenly you have a world where one language is being kept up to date and design catches up to that, but you have another language that lags behind. So it's really multidimensional in that way. But I feel in most cases it's design that's lagging behind once a component has been launched. I
No, that's
think there
interesting
would
because
be.
I was treating code as like a generic abstraction, but then you went into the implementation like there are different languages. So then that multiplicity that definitely happens in the code world. I wonder how much multiplicity happens in the design, how stable the design is versus the code. So that left me wondering. Okay, I mean, I just wanted to have your first impression on where the tension comes from. I think I tend to agree with you. So now I mean, you get to ask a question.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I'd love to.
go
I'd
ahead.
love to. So I would be curious about the longer term plans around Penpot, and do you see it being part of a bigger ecosystem of design tools that would evolve out of that open source design tools? And how do you fit it? How do you see it fit into that larger picture? Because I think there could be a lot of tools built around
Mm.
that concept.
I think I can answer that question on two fronts. One is the larger picture in terms of many more tools, many more tools, um, uh, richer ecosystem. I come from the development world where I have like myriad of options for every single category. It's just amazing how much freedom I have. I don't see that in design. I mean, it might look like it's good and vibrant, but I think the order of magnitude is lower, and this is about scale. So I think Penpot should fit into that larger picture as just one of the tools that was at the forefront of a shift. And what that means is that we see Penpot as a team player. like we see a feature with many more tools like PenPot, and PenPot ma- being sure, making sure that it can interact with that richer ecosystem. And that means not trying to do everything, right? But rather help all the tools, particularly, to be honest, in the open source arena. Like we would like to see more tools like Godot, with their new amazing 4.0 release, a Blender, Inkscape, PenPot. We would like to see more open source design tools in general, because it's easy to be a team player in that ecosystem. But overall, just a PenPot being one of the tools that was born where this was exploding, in terms of different tools, different platforms, different ways to connect each other instead of monolithic tools where you have winner takes all in one big category. Like, let's say I would like to see more categories in a way. So that's one way where we see PenPot as a truly a team player, because there's teams. Okay. And then, I think it's important for us to have PenPot as a platform, not only as a tool. So earlier today, actually, we were having a conversation within the team where we were discussing what type of plugin architecture we need to build so that people really enjoy a ton of freedom. Because other tools similar to PenPod have made their decisions, for probably for the right reasons, but some of them constrain where you can actually build on top of the tools. It's fine. Probably it makes easy, it's easy to keep track of those add-ons, plugins, or whatever. If you basically extremely limit the opportunities. But I think we want to give as much freedom as possible, so that when people look at PenPot, they look not only to at a tool, but as a platform that they can embed in other tools. Why not have PenPod as just part of a building block of something bigger, right? Or there are many ways you can create plugins. We were actually saying that mods could be cool, right? Like, so go beyond the plugin concept and think about mods. Like you change the. So I think that is what is exciting us for the future. A much broader ecosystem where we have these integrations, and we play along with many other tools, many of them now being open source. We don't want to be just like the exception to the rule, to be honest. This is not how we see the market. But then also, this complete freedom to see PenPod as a platform, and make sure that people really create crazy stuff on top of that, and it's sustainable for us to allow for that. Because what you don't want is to give the wrong type of freedom, in the sense that it backfires every single day, because you cannot keep track of those changes. There is mismatch in terms of version compatibility, and it's a nightmare. So that's how I would today, as I would answer the question. If you ask that question in a year, perhaps the answer might change, but I think at the core it will remain the same.
I love that. That sounds really exciting to have PenPot be built as a platform to extend upon, to allow tool makers to either make it their own, but also give them the space to fit into the platform natively. Not natively, but
Yeah.
in a way as a mod. I really love that. That sounds
Yeah, I
exciting.
think that today we were discussing this mod concept, and it was that's so cool. Okay, so let me just go here because I had another question for you. And it's, yeah, I think in terms of that collaboration between design and code, you might have strong opinions, Jan, about the ideal world. What's your view of an ideal world of that collaboration? And what does it look like in terms of tools and processes? It's just, this is asking you for a dream to come true. I'm sure you're not satisfied with the current status quo. For your aspirational status quo, what are the roles? How do you see that collaboration being fruitful? And if there is any role for tools and processes, if you have, a key one top one choice that you would suggest people to look at. And I'm saying tools in terms of PenPod or the
Yeah.
tools, but type of tools, right?
So I think for me, I was diving into these two worlds
Hmm.
at a few different times. When I'm designing, I'm in a design tool. When I'm coding that component, I'm in my code tool. But
Yeah.
there is this differentiation between these tools currently existing that creates this gap between them,
Yeah.
makes these two sides of a component of a design not having enough parity, and which eventually leads to these
Hmm.
to this lagging behind in certain in design or in code, which I've mentioned before. So I think ideally, what I would love is a tool that would allow me to use that same component both in design and development. And there have been a few tools in the past that have tried this. Modules was one of the ones that I was really excited about, which eventually
Hmm.
was shut down in recent, I think, a year ago or so. But to me, that really felt like there is change coming, whereas I can place my component like I would as a building block, as you mentioned. And
Hmm.
I, as a designer, would just have to stitch together the layout that I would want, being constrained by the system, being constrained by the options that it gives me, while maybe eventually allowing this kind of flexibility to still be able to make some changes to that component,
Yeah.
both from a design perspective as well as from a development perspective. The the other thing that I think these two sides merging closer together will allow is that designers will get a, a seat at the table when it comes to actually implementing these things, so to
Yes.
say. It allows much more collaboration if that stuff merges together, or at least blends in a bit nicer to tie in better. As for tools, I'm I'm not sure yet. So I could see these things evolve in different directions, but I was really excited about the prospect of a tool that would allow me to use my code components in design and Framer does this as well in a way. So there is something to that without having this, like by having one way to define a component for design and for code. There is a huge advantage to that, I feel, which might open the door for many other things.
Yeah, I think you touched upon one key aspect of this that we discuss very openly and very passionately also in our community space, where I randomly just post my own musings, which is the seat at the table for designers. Collaboration cannot happen if there is a power struggle there that is not being correctly managed. And I think tools, my concern and the team's concern, to be honest, is that if we don't really approach this collaboration with an open mind and a very empathic mind, um, chances are that the code part will take over at some point. There will be a feeling of freedom because of the code, but actually it's going to add more constraints to what can be designed. And that is not collaboration. That is just working together, let's say, but it's not true collaboration. So I think the solution needs to bring designers to that table on have an equal stance, like as peers. They're over, the ratio is not in their favor. The numbers are not in their favor. They are 1 to 10 in the world. So I think that we need to keep asking designers, what is that would make you excited? Because you would not be conceding reluctantly to just efficiency in the end, right? But rather, we want to have unique contributions from every single stakeholder in the team. So I
Yeah,
think that part of your, I mean, you also commented all the things that would make you, excite you, but I think that one is at the core of our vision too.
I think the design token space is one that kind of shows the potential of what this
Yeah,
could be, where we landed on this platform agnostic format, allowing both designers and developers to contribute to that and to take part in that. And now we see designers creating PRs to actually change the look and feel of a website without ever touching code. So
yeah.
that there is some slight indication of where it could be going. So I'm really excited about where this might end up.
I think the moment that a high performance team, not just one individual having extra superpowers because of the tool they're using, but really high performance team can, that is, it would be difficult to say who is in charge to make production changes. Like you would never know when a change happened on production who was actually responsible of that, and like, you know, click that button and perhaps seeing designers being able to do that, that would be so cool.
Right.
And I think design tokens are one of the ways to achieve that. So related to that, actually, my next question would be around something that you've been working on. We have discussed this in a chat a few weeks ago. This the Cloudsive design language. This is something that I think people should really understand where you're coming from, what do you think the value is to have like an independent standard de facto, if not the jure, language that describes designs. You know, if you could share your idea around that, I think that would be super cool for the audience to receive, to get that knowledge from you.
Right. Yeah. So I originally coming from this was the fact that with the Token Studio plugin, we allow designers to basically apply design decisions on certain layers.
Yeah.
And that design tokens format that the W3C Design Tokens Community Group is working on basically just focuses on the format itself so far. Um, while the application layer itself, like how do we apply design tokens and design tools, is not really handled at all. So that is kept out of there. So that triggers the question, how do we show which design tokens are applied on certain elements? And is that something that is really proprietary to that design tool? Or can there be something more of an open format where we are able to understand how a component is being built into a design or later on even built into code just by landing on this one open format that we can use maybe across design tools? Would it be possible that I take my design that I built in design tool A and take that into the design tool B with having this
Mm,
format as a layer in between, which each tool lands on, which is not SVG, I would imagine, but rather something that has more of behaviors built in,
yeah.
interactions built in. There is a lot of stuff that SVG just can't handle, I would imagine. And the whole application layer of design tokens, to me, feel like they land there, like they should fit right into that one. It being an
Mm,
agnostic format as well. That's the whole promise of design tokens, to be this platform agnostic way to define your design decisions. What if there was a platform agnostic way to describe how a design is built? And can we use that to have this base layer that we can then transform to many different languages, even in code? So I think there's a lot of stuff we can do with automations in that regard as well, which would save a lot of time, would be very efficient. I think it's still tricky to figure out how we build in stuff like interactions or other
yeah.
areas that we need to figure out there. But the promise of that is also very interesting.
How much inspiration would you get from already, kind of languages for that, like CSS? How much of inspiration you would take from there? Would you start from scratch? Would you bring some ideas already found there? Because we know the specificity of SVG, but we also know that CSS does have some behavior interactions and behaviors built in. So, would that be like the starting point, or just nice to have, like knowledge asset? How do you see that?
I think that it could serve as a very good inspiration for it. I don't necessarily think it has to be CSS itself, but rather
Mm,
something else in that regard. Also, when we talk about this declarative design language, it's probably a mix between the actual markup
yeah,
and the style layer to all that.
yeah, that's they're in between.
Yeah,
And that's the tricky part because we have been learning how to kind of split, right? And this is some people will say I'm going tailwind. Again, merge that together, right? In a very interesting way. But yeah, that's I think that is a challenge. How to you get both worlds together, and you don't end up needing to split up again because it's a
yeah.
mess, right?
And if you're able
Perhaps,
to like
yeah,
switch out the decisions you have on your design itself, just like you can do by applying a dark class on HTML and a light class to suddenly switch the whole theme around. I think there is really something that separating these two layers would bring, and keeping
yeah.
the decision layer and the actual markup layer separate would allow for far greater flexibility when it comes to multi-brand design systems, or just
For
simple
example.
theme switching would also help.
So thank you for that. I think actually asked two questions in a row. So it's now your time. You have the right to ask two questions. Sorry for that. I just got excited, but it's fine. We can improvise. So uh, you had another question you would like me
Yeah,
to address? Go
I
ahead.
do. I do. On the topic of being open source as an open source design tool, which Penpot
Yeah.
is, do you have a process in place to ensure that you are able to maintain Penpot as it scales, while still staying profitable and still staying open source? I would love to understand the current thinking around that as somebody who's also in open source.
Yeah. So we get this question around are you going what are your plans to be a sustainable project. Some people will just go directly to the profits. uh, so profits is a subset of sustainability doesn't really require profits, but we are a company, so and for us we're in the subset too. So I think we strongly believe in the power of an ecosystem and a really enlightened community, and that means we need to make sure that we have a plugin architecture, but also contributions to the core uh, that just go beyond our capability. Like it's just the core team is there to make sure that magic happens, that the product has a like a clear vision, and that we stay true to that, because I think that is the bigger risk for us to just get distracted because of the feature requests, or we are very exposed to feedback. We develop in the open, so you get to know the stable release, but also any experimental work that we are building, right? So it's tricky for us to stay focused if we get a ton of feedback and we want to make sure that people feel engaged and that we are listening. So I think for us, we need to make sure that everyone is invited to build on top of Penpot, and make sure that regardless of how we are going to make money, Penpot as an open source ecosystem is full of life. It's like really people get to choose this one, and we got this game theory paradigm where we have generous people and everyone just gives away 1 unit and gets 99 units in return. So we're going to be very obsessed about making sure that this is not something that we have closed to the core team, but actually, again, the team player model. Like we don't get to develop everything. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable because we we've got great ideas, but we don't own the whole innovation solution space, right? So we need to focus on the core value and let other people get to the specific use cases, whether they're corner cases or not, and also create value themselves. But then, of course, we need at some point to develop value, create value where we can charge for that. That it allows us to make sure that we are not very because this has to happen fast. I think this is not one of those many open source projects that I really use and love. I've been in open source in 1997, so I've seen a ton of stuff. This needs to go fast, and to go fast, you need to keep a very kind of relatively big team focused, and that costs a ton of money. So the way to make sure that that doesn't, that we don't break the bank is to develop some features that are not really targeting power users. Like they're not really targeting people like you, Jan, or myself, but rather enterprise customers that really need that extra capacity that is quite irrelevant for the power user that is there to enjoy productivity, collaboration, etc. But is not interested in compliance, audit, is not interested in insights or reporting. That is nice, but there's no value for them there. Rather, other personas, the buyer type persona that is really for us key is that manager, executive level that is using Penpot and wants to extract some extra value that is only relevant for them, and they don't have anything to give in return other than money. They don't contribute, they don't speak about the tool, they don't help us with feedback, perhaps. They just can give money. It's the only thing they can do. Like no time, no resources, no code, no contributions, just money. Okay, we'll take that money and make sure that we keep giving away a ton of stuff for everyone else, right? For that to succeed, we need to be relevant, you know, because this is an issue around scale. There's no way you can have the economics of this working out if you're tiny, or even if you're just average size. For this to work for us and for people to really enjoy, that we keep giving away so much value for everyone to enjoy forever for free with a capital F, we need to be so big that we can capture that value from those stakeholders. And it's a win-win. So that's fine. So those are our plans. So by the end of 20, well, we're kind of targeting the end of 2024. So that's 2 years still to start rolling out enterprise-oriented features. For now, we have a ton of work to do just in the power user space. And we will continue to do that, once we have some paid features, because that's where we really keep ourselves relevant. But like the first incarnation of this idea in terms of paid features will happen, yeah, not earlier than by the end of 2024. We have so much stuff to prove before that I think that is not distracting us at the moment. We know we have to do it, but it's not something that we're discussing right now at the team, because it's like, who cares about that? We need first to prove that we are relevant, that we have to be relevant, and that comes from power users, really.
Yeah, that sounds exciting as well. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, me
I would
too.
have
Me
one
too.
more.
Yeah, you
I
have
would have
one
one more
more.
question if we have time. Maybe a
We have.
quick one.
Yeah, let's do it.
During the time you've been building Penpot, what would you say were the biggest mistakes you made so far, which eventually ultimately helped shape the product as it is today and really helped to steer that direction into the right one?
Mm. Yeah, like so mistakes that turned out to be good decisions in the end, because I could answer mistakes that still are mistakes, like mistakes that were mistakes at a given time, and they are now like problematic to deal with. But I think that basically our biggest mistake, or the one that failed as a mistake, and yet we decided to go that path anyway, was early access. Like release early, like not early but super early, because what happened is that people got the impression that we could already take contributions, that we could already get feedback that would be then taken into account in our product backlog. So we got massive exposure. And speaking here 2 years ago, that's the time frame. So for people, so 2 years ago, we released our alpha, you know, and it felt like it was perhaps a mistake because we could not operate the exposure. It would lead to frustration to everyone, including the team, of course. So, but then what happened is that we said, okay, we have to cope with this. This might have been a mistake. This is life. We believe in open source. We want to develop in the open. This is a huge toll in the team because expectations are high, and we cannot satisfy those expectations. So this is hard. But what happened is that then after a year, when we were ready to develop to release our beta, and where we were looking for killer features, people that have started with us as community members back then have a very clear picture of our vision. They had a clear understanding of where we were, what we're standing up for. And we got impressive feedback that led to things like Flex Layout. Flex Layout, none other than Flex Layout. So overall, the decision to do the super early access for people to, this is what we have. This is a bit shitty, but and having those conversations where we were really frustrating people a lot, in the end, gave us very specific help on killer features because people got it. They were not newcomers saying, I would like this or that. They could understand what we were trying to build and gave us feedback or would test features that were actually quite valuable. And Flex Layout actually came from that conversation. You could go to community space and see where they were saying, you might want to discuss a different way to do layout, including Flex Layouts, and that wouldn't have happened if we would have this closed ecosystem for too long. So I'm happy that we made that mistake. It cost us some pain, but in the end, you got now PenPod exiting beta, a few weeks ago, and it's just Flex Layout is there, and it's thanks to the community. So I think that's a very good example of past mistakes coming back and saying, actually, it was for the better, but we didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, I love that. What about a backstory on Flex Layout?
Yes,
Exciting.
yes. Flex AI is like the poster child of apparently early mistakes and then turning out to for the better. And I think that's the power of community, true community, like with a capital C, like freedom with a capital F. You also get just communities out there, but I think open source communities can dream bigger. And this is one of the cases where everyone enjoys that distributed innovation, right? We don't hold the answers to all questions, but we promise you that we will listen. So this is, you don't have any more questions?
No, I'm good. I think that was all. Yeah.
That was all. That was great. Thank you so much, Jan. This was such a great pleasure to welcome you to this open chat, the PenPod podcast. And I hope to meet you in person at some event, in the next few months. But yeah, we'll put some links about you so people can reach out to you if they want. But for now, just have a great day.
Thank you. Wish you a great day too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.